The next section here is um, the extra etiquettes that should be observed when you have people over, when you invite guests. So the first thing is when you serve, you shouldn't serve yourself first. You should serve those that are deserving of your service in order of their age or in order of their virtue or their position. So if you have in your group elders, then you should serve the elders first. And then if you have in your group those who are considered ashab al-fadl, you have scholars or leaders or something of that nature, then you should serve them as well. Unless, of course, you are the one that is being followed. You're the leader. And so you will start the meal. Also, you shouldn't sit quietly while eating. But eating is a social. It's also a social gathering, a social moment that you should talk and chat, and you should speak about righteous things while eating. You don't want to turn it into a moment of sin and transgression, but talk about righteous things. He says you should tell stories of the righteous to each other while eating, and that also is for any other scenario. These are things that you want to do regardless if you're eating or not. You should keep the conversations positive, pleasant, and remind one another of Allah. It says also you should give preference to your companion or your friend, someone that you've someone that you've invited over, while not compelling them at the same time. Okay, this can be quite tricky depending on the culture you come from. If you invite people over, it can get quite uncomfortable. You don't want to make your guest uncomfortable by trying to compel them to eat, but it should be a happy moment. And then you don't want to pretend and make up this, put this show on that you're disappointed if they're not eating enough, or, you don't want to kill the person, but you want to let them do their thing. There are people that are 8 cylinders, and there's the 6-cylinder, and then there's less than that. Some people, they really go at it and they can eat a lot, and there's some people that they're moderate and they're modest, and there's some people that they get full quickly. And so to really push and to force food on them, it becomes embarrassing, it becomes awkward, it's off-putting, and it can lead to the person not wanting to accept an invitation because they know they're going to go and they're going to get slaughtered over this food. And it sounds like some of you know what that feels like, but I've been in this situation before, and I've left feeling not only a bit upset, but sick. Yeah. Out of shyness, a person will actually, depending on the level of their shyness, they will actually force themselves to be uncomfortable for your sake. And typically, you're putting on a show, is what he's saying here as well. Is he's going to make him or herself feel bad for your fake act, that you think it's some cultural thing like, I'm so generous, I'm so this. No, keep it real. Let it be easy and smooth. Let it be happy. Let them do their thing. Make it as comfortable as possible and as open as possible. Let them eat what they want. Don't, force that on them so that it does not become a bitter moment. The other thing he says is that you shouldn't be looking at your guest while they're eating. Right? It doesn't mean looking at their general direction. It means you shouldn't be observing them, how they're chewing their food, how are they putting. Again, he says the reason for that is because it can be embarrassing. Imagine if you're sitting there and then everyone stops and starts to look at you while you eat. You get real self-conscious, and oh my God, are they judging me for how big the bite is, or I don't know. The next thing is that you should not do anything off-putting or repugnant. What does that mean? He gives some examples here. And this is where we get back to the taking out seeds and spitting out stones and dealing with the things like that, bones and all that stuff. Because some of this stuff can get a bit repugnant in how we handle this stuff. So there are a few guidelines. He says, for example, you shouldn't shake off your hand in the bowl or the plate. Like if you're eating, because you're eating with your hand, and there may get some food on there, food gets stuck on there, you don't shake it back into it. Like if you're eating rice or meat or something like that, and while you're eating with your doing your three fingers or whatever you're doing, and you notice that it starts to get stuck on there, you don't fling it back onto the plate. Okay? The next thing is that when you're sitting on your sufra, your table mat, or you're sitting at the table and you're eating, typically now I want you to picture you're all eating together, and normally you're eating on a very large plate or something like that. He says that you don't put your head over the plate. That's kind of almost contradictory to what we're taught here, is that lean over the plate so that food doesn't fall into your lap. But you're not sitting in a chair if you're sitting on the floor. You've kind of positioned yourself. You don't lean over the plate to eat, to bring the food to your mouth. Why do you think that is? So that if any food falls out of your mouth or from your hand, it doesn't fall back into the plate that everyone's eating on. All right, so it's almost like holding how you handle food that you're eating and then discarding and where you're putting it. It's like you're trying to avoid cross-contamination of the food, because that can be repugnant. It can be off-putting.
Is this like a joint plate situation?
This is like a joint plate situation, right? Where the food is going to be mixed all there. You know, it's one plate. So that's the context of what we're talking about here, right? And obviously some manners are contextual, so you do have to consider that. It may be that the scenario requires that you eat over the plate, so you don't. It's your single plate. It's no big deal at that point. But here we're talking about a communal gathering. If you're going to spit anything out to get rid of it, like a bone or anything, a seed or some piece of cartilage or something, then you should turn your face away from the food, and you should take it with your left hand and discard it, because you're eating with your right. Right? So you don't want to handle the things that you throw away with the hand that you're eating with. Check this out. The next thing he says, you don't dip the bite that is like greasy, if you will, into the vinegar sauce. And you don't dip the vinegar product or food into the fatty sauce. You don't cross-contaminate. You don't mix the sauces up. Some people are particular about that. They don't want their foods to touch. There's a certain type of flavor here, so your sweets and your savories and your spices and your this. In a communal setting, you're not going to go and ruin that for everybody. Again, if it's your own thing, you're eating by yourself, it's your own plate, then, have at it and mix it all up however you like. But otherwise, you can't impose yourself on everybody else. That, look, I like to dip this and that and the other. And the next one and the last one, he says, you don't double dip. If you know what I'm talking about. You take the French fry, you dip it in the ketchup, you take a bite, and then you dip it back into the ketchup, and you finish. Right? If it's a communal setting and people are eating from the same thing, then what you're doing is you're introducing your saliva and whatever else is in your mouth potentially back into that food source. And so it can be difficult for people to watch that. Next thing is the next section here, and we're going to wrap it up with this section, is when it comes to serving food. So now we've had some things to do with eating, now eating with others, and now when you actually serve the food. So it's preferred that you serve food to your brothers in Islam, or your sister. You serve the faithful, your brothers and your sisters. Reported by Ali radiallahu anhu, he says, لأن أجمع إخواني على صائم طعام أحب إلي من أن أعتق رقبة. Because it's more beloved to me that I call my brothers to eat a sa' min ta'am. It's just a little bit of food than me releasing a bondservant. So this is a great act. It's a great thing to do, is to have people, to host people, to share with people your food. It was reported Khaythama, who was one of the great scholars of hadith, Khaythama ibn Sulaiman al-Qurashi, min hufad al-hadith, rahala. He traveled around a great deal in search of hadith. He was the muhaddith of Sham during his time. He used to make food, and he would call Ibrahim al-Nakhai and al-A'mash. These were also great giants in the sciences of hadith collections, etc. And he would tell them to eat the food because he had prepared it for them. So here you can see, the tradition of sharing and breaking bread together in our tradition, in our faith. And so here, when you're going to present food, you're going to serve people, then you should serve whatever's available without going overboard, without putting yourself in a bind. And you should also not ask or seek permission to serve, but you should just do it without getting permission. And then when you do present or serve food, then you should give a little bit of whatever it is that you have, whatever's available. And what I mean by permission is, someone comes to your house, you invite somebody over. The Islamic etiquette is that you present and you serve without them letting you know, saying, would you like some water? And a person that's shy is going to say no. They could be dying of thirst, but some people will say no because they don't want to be a burden. And because you're asking, it almost appears as if you're going to make me do some work, and I'm going to have to get up and arrange this, that, and the other. So the idea, the best approach is that you do it as a general practice, as a kind of a standard. You present, and then you let them do as they wish, eat what they like or drink whatever. So this is a person as the host. Now, the visitor who's been invited also has a number of etiquettes, and from those is that you don't suggest a particular type of food. It says, we're going to bring some food out. What do you want? You don't suggest something in particular because it may not be available. It could be difficult to obtain. And then now you're going to go put the host in a bind, because if the host is shy and is generous, and they're going to feel bad to say, no, we don't have that, or they have to send someone out to the store, etc. So basically taking whatever it is that you have and accepting whatever's available so that things are easy and it doesn't become a burden. When it becomes a burden, you don't want to do it anymore. That's what happens a lot of times with us now, is when we invite people over, we feel like it has to be such an affair. It has to be such an undertaking. I have to cook for hours and I have to slave over this. I'm not going to do this again. I don't want to do this again. So what happens is we don't do it anymore. We end up not inviting each other over anymore because we make it out to be something that it doesn't have to be. So look, keep it real, okay? When the dinner that you've invited people over for, is that the dinner that you eat every night? No, it's not. Do you think that the people you're going to invite over, they eat that every night? Jabril's like, wait a minute.
You're trying to be a great host, that's all.
No, look. Do you see the problem, though? You see the potential where the problem is.
Sure,
yeah.
Sure.
The problem is that we're going to see each other a couple times a year at most. Yeah.
Sure.
But if you keep it real and you just, if you want to improve on the dinner, I mean, look, serving Cheerios at night that might work for you some nights, but yeah, you might not want to do that for your guest because you do have something that's available. It's a little better for dinner, but then you don't have to go all out on it so that it becomes a burden. And that way you can keep the tradition alive, and it's easy going. And if everyone understands that and is on the same page, then they're not going to expect anything else of you. Right? They're not going to expect that, well, I'm going to go over and I'm going to expect this 5-star meal with all these courses, etc. Somebody's been making brisket for like 15 hours, That's why we don't have brisket all the time, brothers, because it takes so long to make that meal and other things. And then if you're asked, as a guest, if you're asked about what food you would like, if they give you a selection, then you should take the easiest of those selections, or the most, the most affordable of those. If they say, look, I have this and that, then take what you think would be easiest for them, unless here, and there's a beautiful story here, unless you know that by picking something, that big meal, it would make the host happy. If you know that, look, they've been really hounding me to come visit, and my accepting their invitation has just made them so happy, and they really wanna put on the big show and really treat me, then yeah, you go ahead and suggest the big one if they give you the choice. And there was a little story here from Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, and he visited a scholar by the name of Za'farani. He was al-Qasidin Muhammad. He was a faqih and one of the scholars of hadith. And he also narrated from Imam al-Shafi'i. And he was really wanting Imam al-Shafi'i to visit him. And so eventually Imam al-Shafi'i went and visited his house to eat. And as Za'farani, he used to write a menu on a daily basis. He would write down the menu, what was going to be served and what was going to be, prepared for that day. And, cook various different types of foods. And he would give that menu to the servant. And so Imam al-Shafi'i, he got a hold of the menu because he knew his host was trying to, was really excited that he was there, and he actually added to the menu something else. Yeah, and when the Sheikh Za'farani, he realized that, he became extremely happy that Imam al-Shafi'i was, kind of contributing, letting him know that, well, this is what I'd like, this is what I'd want, and this is what would make me happy, and the intention was, for it to be a happy occasion. And so that's where we'll conclude, because I don't want to go any longer than that. جزاك الله خير وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.